Oh, yeah, no, that's the chat window. So you can
Okay.
just press the / to type.
Okay, so it looks to me like I'm sitting now.
You are sitting, Kimberly.
Okay.
Am I sitting?
I aimed at the chair, and I guess maybe now it's working.
You're standing on the chair, Terry.
Well, that suits my personality. I'll just stay standing on the chair. At least I'm not in the lake.
That's true.
That was hilarious.
Wow, this is a great screen.
Yeah, we can see the screen now.
Okay. Is it showing you like in the editor Google Slides, or is it showing you like the whole slide?
No, it looks like a display, like a
Yeah,
slide,
full
like a
screen.
regular presentation.
Okay, good. Awesome. Because there's a lot of text. I'm not going to read through everything. It's really just, we'll talk through some stuff, and it'll serve as conversation starter. And if you guys want to go back and read through some of it on your own, you're welcome to do that. If there's anything that you feel like is just doesn't sound right, or you know differently to be the case, I, in full disclaimer, use ChatGPT and Google Bard for a lot of this. So there are some things that I raised eyebrows at and had to kind of like verify and change. So if you guys notice anything like that, yeah, just drop me a note, because sometimes, when we rely too heavily on these AI generation tools, we end up with some funky stuff. So I put together some topics also from Google Bard and ChatGPT. And I guess where I thought it made sense to start is just like the very basic building blocks of 3D models, and you'll see a lot of these wireframe or mesh figures that are like kind of the basis for that. And it's all math, right? Like it's all a bunch of vertices and lines that connect them, and that's what creates the basis of a 3D model. The very basic polygon, most basic polygon being a triangle. I've developed a little bit of a fondness for triangles, out of the whole appreciation of simplicity. But these are all showing in squares, and I'm not sure why that is. Quads, I guess. Four-sided shapes. And I think you guys have heard me talk about like polycount before. How you can have low poly models, which show kind of lesser detail, but are kind of more cartoony looking usually. And that's something, especially for like a training perspective, depending on your source material, like what you're trying to, what your content is, you may not need to have really large, complex, super detailed models, right? Like, you can have kind of softer shapes, softer models, or assets. And I know, Kristen, in your presentation back at DevLearn, you talked a bit about like Uncanny Valley and how real is too real.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess just on that topic, there was an interesting, does everyone here know what Uncanny Valley is? It's sort of when the likeness of an avatar or non-player character is a little bit too real to the point where it's kind of eerie because like it looks so real, but we know it's not because maybe they have like a feature that is just a little bit off, and it actually like biologically is like a mechanism within us to be like completely turned off by it. And so that's just something that we definitely want to try to avoid. And you know that's more so related to the when you're creating avatars or virtual humans that are like very, very high fidelity. Obviously less so if you're going more on the lines of sort of more caricature-ish type of avatars.
Yeah, you know, something about Uncanny Valley that, at least in my experience, you know, recently with AI image generation, we see that a lot with like hands, how hands don't really ever come out quite right in AI. That's like a good example of Uncanny Valley in AI, at least for, um, and yeah, in VR it might be things like the way the mouth moves is not really normal looking. It doesn't look natural, or like the way the eyes move sometimes. Those are things that I've noticed that, like in stuff that they try to be too realistic, but they don't quite hit the mark. Um, we're playing Diablo 4 right now, and all of the characters, like the artwork of this game is just incredible. It's so good. But then they all have really weird looking eyebrows and eyelashes. Like it's not really quite hair texture. Doesn't look right. Um, but yeah, that's definitely, you know, something to consider. You know, you have to kind of balance your the size of your models and how they might impact your rendering and performance with like how realistic does it need to be, and you know, for training that's really totally dependent on the content. I mean, you might have training that's on specific equipment that needs to be very realistic, to really have the greatest impact, and that's where I think that really comes into play, is really with equipment, and maybe more technical training. Yeah, so there's kind of the general components of a 3D model. Um, and yeah, again, I'll link to this presentation in the Slack channel, but there's a lot, so I'm going to move on. Bunch of file formats that I listed out here for you guys. I would say the most common ones that I see are these top ones. So GLB, GLTF, and OBJ files, FBX sometimes too. And if you use Blender for 3D modeling, you know, .blend is their native file format. I'm not familiar at all with the others. I guess this stereolithography is used for 3D printing. Does anybody here have experience with 3D printing? That's something I have not gotten to play with. I'm kind of curious about.
Tristia?
Yeah.
So I'm hearing a lot of static. I don't know if is that coming from your end, or is that maybe someone needs to mute their microphone?
Yeah, I think it's coming from someone else.
Okay, I'm gonna mute now. Everyone, make sure you're muted.
Yeah, so you guys can check that out whenever you feel like it. And yeah, creating 3D models from real life objects, which I think has a lot of potential application in training, and there's so many different ways to do it that, you know, have different quality outputs, and you know, might be more accessible, like photogrammetry. You can even use your smartphone just to take multiple pictures and use software to like stitch it together. One thing I did not include on here, and I completely forgot about it, I think I shared it on the Slack channel at one point recently, but there is a new AI tool where you can upload a 2D image and create a 3D model from that image. It looked really neat. I didn't get to try it, but it did look really cool. I'll link to that again, or if we have time, we'll check it out. But yeah, tons of different ways to do it. Interestingly, there is a couple of organizations and university programs out there that are dedicated to historic preservation of sites of interest and art museums and artwork, but even like historic buildings and historic sites, and that's to me really exciting. I mean, places. Nothing lasts forever, right? Except for digital information, really, and maybe not even that at some point. But I think it's a really incredible way to preserve history is put it in VR and not just make it accessible to everybody, but kind of retain that record of those physical sites. Google does a lot of work with that. Has anybody seen anything really cool in that space?
There used to be a thing called the Wayback Machine, but I think they had to get rid of it recently. They used to have like a lot of old internet content, like super old HTML only sites and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the Google education sites has a bunch of like 3D scanned historical stuff. Yeah, so a bunch of ways to do that. You guys can check those out, Google them. Some pros and cons there. Tools for creating or editing 3D models. There's kind of a general list and a little bit about each of these. Again, thank you, ChatGPT, for for that. I think all of them have quite a bit of a learning curve. Blender's definitely the most popular and according to many, the easiest to use. I've included a link at the end of this where you can watch some YouTube tutorials on getting started with Blender. SketchUp has been around for a long time and is also pretty like easy to catch up on. Places you can buy 3D models, which I really push for because chances are somebody's made it and made it better than I could ever make it. It might take me months to get up to speed. And that's why there's just another reason, I guess, why there's so many positions involved in creating VR experiences, right? It takes a lot of, hey, sorry. It takes a lot of expertise to get there. So these are some places you can purchase 3D models. And yeah, I love checking out the Unity Asset Store. There's just a lot of like fun stuff to check out there. Some things to think about when you're buying 3D models. Usage rates apply for this type of media the same as it does for anything else. So I'd say that's the big one. But usually when you buy a model, you're paying for those usage rates. But always check the fine print because it may not be for commercial use. Again, quality, poly count, and performance, and the formats that it comes in for sure. Things like scenario VR and some of the drag and drop browser-based VR builders are only compatible with certain formats and like Zapper and stuff if you're making AR stuff. So you definitely want to look out for like what formats the model comes in that you're purchasing and if that works with what you're building in. Oh, sorry. Go back there. Considerations for implementing 3D models. I'm not going to read through all that. There's colliders, things that make the model solid, triggers for interactions, what happens when you know, click certain buttons or pull certain triggers when you're near a 3D model, and whether that triggers any kind of visual effects or audio effects, or animations. Yeah, and one thing I feel like it's kind of out of place, but the bit about prefabs and asset management. So for those, especially the instructional designers in the group that are familiar with Storyline and Captivate, maybe uh, when you have an object in different on multiple slides, you might want to make a global change. And I've seen this even actually in some of the like video editing tools and animation tools. When you have multiple instances of a certain image or object, and you want to change something about it globally, that's actually quite difficult. You have to kind of go through every instance. When you're building in something like Unity, that's not the case. You can make the change to your prefab, which is kind of like the parent instance, and wherever you have that object in your game, like if you have a multiple of a certain kind of tree, and you want to change the color of the tree, you only do that to the prefab, and it changes it throughout the whole project. So it just kind of makes development a little simpler. And Lordy, if anybody knows how to do that in Storyline, please let me know, because it's a nightmare. I think we're getting pretty close. I think this is the last slide, actually. Applying physics to 3D models. This image here, this GIF, is kind of demonstrating what that looks like, and the different parts of an object that you can manipulate, and how you kind of change those settings. But some of the terms there to just kind of know and understand the basics of, for if you're starting to build in VR, just to or model in three, or create 3D models, then these are just some good concepts to know. So I guess like how dense things are, like the shapes, the like what happens when there's a collision. Things like how an object might behave. I think some of us have seen those really cool promos for Unreal Engine where they have like super realistic looking fabric or hair, or clouds or water. All of those things are kind of really, they take a lot of complex programming. But within, a physics engine like Unity, there's a lot you can adjust. Like you can make, you do have to like let, the program know what to do with an object though. So like if you have a 3D model of a feather, you're probably going to want to adjust, the weight of that feather relative to a stone, but the program itself doesn't know the difference. They're probably the same, like they might be the same size, but if you like, you need to set that weight so that they behave properly within that physics engine. Yeah, these kind of seem a little bit out of order, so I might change that around. But there's some links for you guys. Again, I'll throw this presentation in the Slack channel. I thought the articles were kind of helpful, but the Blender YouTube tutorial is pretty great. I think I walked through that like last year sometime, or earlier this year maybe, and I thought it was a really good tutorial. And if you guys are ever interested, I did this tiny world sketch, or in Gravity sketch. So it's just this Little project I made. And mute that. And this is Gravity Sketch. So it took me about 3 hours to do the whole project. I'm not gonna go through the whole video, but just so you guys can kind of see how that works.
Show us the end.
Sorry. Oh yeah, pretty much. These you can sculpt 3D models and then export them to programs like Blender, and that's another way to create your own custom 3D models. I'm gonna skip ahead here, get to the fun stuff. Oh, I spent a long time making clouds, I think. And choosing shapes, I guess. Oh, and watching tutorials. That's always important. Not very realistic looking clouds there. It is sped up quite a lot. There we go. There's making some ridiculously large trees for my tiny planet. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess I added some more detail at the end there. Playing with different textures and colors and things. So that was fun. Yeah, but that's it. I'm just checking and catching up on the chat here. Cool. Rapid Compact. Hey Dustery, how's it going? Do you want to tell us about Rapid Compact? What's that?
So one of the challenges I found with some of the AR work I was doing was that the models I was finding were just too large. They were unwieldy, and they wouldn't work in some of the programs I tried to use. Like when I tried to bring them into some of the Zapper tools and some of the rapid authoring tools. So I was told about this tool here, and essentially what it does is you just kind of choose a button. It reminds me a lot of if anybody's ever used Handbrake for videos. Kind of very similar in theory to what it does to 3D models. And in some cases, it actually fixed 3D models that wouldn't work in certain places because they were too big by sort of crunching down. So that was a handy thing. It doesn't work all the time in there. But, I mean, I don't know how many people have actually worked with 3D models in any of these spaces, but it is probably the single most difficult thing about working in something like virtual reality, finding quality models that are optimized in such a way that can be used, especially for more realistic applications. So I know that that's one of the biggest things. If you can find a 3D modeling team or group that can do that, never let them go. Put a ring on that finger because you want to hang out with them forever.
Nice. Yeah, I will. I'll definitely check that out and add a link to that on the presentation links. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. Jay, you want to tell us about UModeler? So that's like specifically, is it like an add-on for Unity? Is your audio not working? Ruh-roh. Okay. Bummer. Well, yeah. I'll give it a Google and we'll check it out. Anything anybody has worked on or with in regards to 3D models or anything that any pieces of wisdom they'd like to share or tools that they've experimented with. Cool, cool. There's no time like the present. There are a lot of tools out there for free. I've even played with a couple browser-based ones. I'll see if I can rustle up some links to that. Um, but yeah, yeah, there is a lot of application. I think especially, you know, for training, even in simple environments. If you're training on, like we talked about earlier, a piece of machinery or equipment, uh, or even really process training, you know, depending on what that is. Anybody curious about specific aspects of 3D modeling or
I use
Yes,
the scanner. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
The scanner on the iPhone. I can't remember the name of it, and I'm in my headset, so I can't look it up. But it used to be right, and it used to Poly something or other. It used to be free, but it's not anymore. But that was a lot of fun to scan. I mean, what I was scanning was small because it takes up a huge amount of space. So I scanned things that were little, and it was really cool. But back then I heard it's not free anymore, but it was free when I was playing with it.
I think you can do something similar with Samsung phones. I was not able to get it to work the last time I tried. I can't remember why, but there is an app you can use or something that you can get for your Samsung phone. I'm not sure if you have to like put it in developer mode or something, and I'm not really sure, but it is possible, and yeah, there is I think even free software out there to take images to create a 3D model from cell phone images, like using photogrammetry.
Yeah, I have experimented a little with it. I think there's one called, is it Luma? Luma AI? That's kind of what I remember it being called. But you know, you just literally take your cell phone and walk around the object several times and they tell you what position to hold your phone. It's pretty, you know, self-explanatory. And the object was, you know, it was okay. It was pretty good.
I've seen some videos using it. Yeah, there was one where a guy did his son. He did like his son's face.
Hmm.
He like went around his head, and it was actually really good. Like a lot better than the strange. Does anybody remember when they did that for spatial with your face, and it would like make a weirdly stretched face on your 3D
Yeah, that was
avatar?
pretty strange.
Talk about uncanny valley. Yeah.
Uh,
I
yeah,
also
I think,
tried using a tool on my phone. I think it's called QLone, capital QLONE. But I've only tried it with like scanning really small objects like my earbud. But for that, it was pretty helpful. I think I needed one of those like mats though for it at the time.
what do you mean by Mac?
Like it was there's it kind of looks like a QR code looking thing, but it helps with like oh, I don't even know what you call it. I'm sure there's a like a correct name for it, but it helps with like knowing like the scale of something. Let me look it up.
While she's looking that up, one of the things that I noticed when I was using Luma AI, I think that's what it was, I did a scan of a photogrammetry, is that how you say it? Scan of a picnic table. And, you know, because you need space to walk around the object and you have to circle it about 3 different times, putting your phone at different levels. And the one thing I realized later was like, wow, that took up a lot of cellular data. So next time, if I were to do something like that, I would try to find an object. The problem is like in your home, sometimes you might not have enough space to physically walk around the object and get the right level. So you have to kind of set up your space, hopefully where you've got free Wi-Fi and do your filming, um, you know, in a place that's not going to cost you an arm and a leg.
And I did it outside so that the light was better. And I used a like Lazy Susan thing to get all sides, but then I couldn't get the bottom, so that didn't work out so well.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant. I'm sharing something up on the screen. Like that's the kind of thing that I used when I tried out the Qlone app. And I put the object like on top of it. So imagine that's like the mat or like the piece of paper printout, and like the object goes like on top of it in the middle.
Oh.
But I don't really know the mechanisms behind how like
Mm-hmm.
how this works or anything.
Have you noticed any of the standard instructional design tools are able to import these 3D objects and use them within like the Scenario VR allow you to import objects?
Scenario VR does, yeah.
Mm.
You know, I'm not sure about Storyline. I don't think so. Captivate might. They were a little bit ahead of the curve on that. On at least like 360. I think from what I understand, Storyline's gone through a lot of updates with 360 though, so that might not be the case anymore.
Mm.
But I think as far as other editors, most of them can. Even here in Spatial, we can import 3D models, and I think the dinosaur one might have been built in, but that there's another model we had in here. Let me see if I can import it. So if you go to the little plus at the bottom and go to add content, they're actually integrated with Sketchfab now. And there is a spatial creator toolkit that you can like create your own little environments. But yeah, there's an option to upload, so you can upload your own too.
testing my mic now.
Oh, we can hear you a little bit, Jay.
Okay. I'll just share a couple of words. Yeah, okay. So like people that use Unity, I recommend that there's different like things you can like buy to make models directly in that engine. So you can turn your like actual engine into like a modeler itself in that sense. It's probably best for prototyping, but you know, I think that like for example, I work with a team of people that actually are, so other people on my team are 3D modelers, like professional 3D modelers. So they're in charge of like making sure the models are low poly and like optimized. That's really important actually. I always say like that's really important for like finished products. You have to make sure your models are really low poly. Like really, I wouldn't say that, but it's just they have to be optimized for like your final product, right? So they take care of that stuff though. I'm an instructional designer, so I'm not really involved in that part of it, but that is important to like what Desiree mentioned earlier about optimizing your models, and all that good stuff. Everything that everyone shared earlier kind of plays into that whole like aspect of you got to optimize your models, and I'll kind of sum it up as like the uModeler asset I mentioned earlier can export these actual models themselves. So like the actual models that remodelers were used for the like final builds and so forth, the FBX and OBJ models can be exported from that uModeler asset. So yeah, I think everyone shared like a lot of good stuff this evening. So it all plays together like within our collective spaces, you know. So I think it was a really good evening to share all our knowledge about 3D models.
Yeah, thanks. It was a learning experience for me too. I had to look up a lot of this stuff. I mean, some of it I'm familiar with, but I was learning quite a lot too. Just now I put up this big potted plant over here, and I feel like this is a really good, like, kind of classic example of a low poly model. When you blow it up real big, there's just a couple of faces. It's more simplified. But then, we can put in something like the crown that I just had in there, and that, is it consists of a lot more detail. There's, even this Viking helmet, I guess. It has a lot more depth to the texture, which is, more about the texture and kind of, I guess, the wrapping of the 3D model. But like when we look at it, it's very smooth, it's very rounded, so there's probably a lot of polygons involved. Especially with all of these different faces and that chainmail that they've got in the back there. That's depending on how much of this is the wrapping and like the texture is a more appropriate term, and how much of it is actually polygons determining that shape. Both of those things are going to impact the size of this model. So I guess low poly, probably higher poly, almost definitely higher poly, side by side. So, you can see the level of detail is very different. The realism is very different. So. Anything else anybody wants to share? And also, if you guys think of anything in the space or just cool stuff that you come across in VR, immersive training, immersive learning, go ahead and share it on the Slack.
so much, Tristia. This was super insightful. I feel like I learned a lot.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah, that was a
you.
great presentation.
I'm glad.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
I will put the slides in the Slack channel, and everybody have a lovely, wonderful evening.
Amazing. You too. Have a great long weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Bye.